Were you raised by a narcissistic mother? Well, then there may be some issues we want to talk about in today's video about that. Hang on. So being raised by a narcissistic mother can cause all kinds of problems for us later in our life as we mature and get older and reflect back on where we learned what we learned and how it's impacting us now, and how the relationship with our mother, if they're a narcissist, caused some destruction in our life. It's common. Dealing with a narcissist in general can be very confusing and complicated in one's life, more or less if they happen to be our own mother. And there's varying degrees of narcissism. There's traits where some people who just exhibit some more minor symptoms of being a narcissist, all the way to NPD, full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. So on the spectrum of it all, depending on where you fall in that bell curve, is how much your life has been impacted probably. NPD. However, there were enough traits there that caused a lot of complications in her children's life. And for her, it was more about the emotional incest, taking over one of her children for her own needs, because she's the narcissist. She's the one who sees the world revolving around her, right? So they make life about them, and in this case, a child's needs are secondary, and they're sort of denied their proper identity development stages because it's focused on the mothers. But before we talk about those traits in general, let's just examine the fact that most narcissistic mothers marry men who are less dominant, more submissive, are capable of being emasculated by the narcissistic mother, because that's the kind of mate they seek. They want to be the ones generally in power, in control, making things all about them. So that includes the man that they marry, or if you're gay, the woman that you marry. And the narcissist may not even know they're doing that when they're out dating and picking a mate. All they know is they're drawn to somebody where they feel somewhat superior to, because they in essence want to wear the pants in the family, so to speak. Remember, the narcissist has to come first. It's about their needs, their wants, and they have very little capacity for empathy and understanding someone else's point of view. So how this affects the child is the child, number one, is not going to feel very heard or seen by that narcissistic parent. Their opinions don't really matter, and being authentic to the parent doesn't really matter, because they only want to hear what they want to hear. You have to mirror back to them what they want to hear, and if they want to believe that they're this great super parent, then they don't want to really know that you're struggling, or you have some issues in your life, or these are your problem areas, or mom, sometimes I'm just sad, or I'm depressed. They don't want to just hear that, because they want to believe that if you're my son or daughter, then things have got to be up here. The bar has to be set really high, and anything below is not anything they want to deal with. So because of that, if a kid is even trying to be authentic, oftentimes they're not. They just sort of give up and keep everything in. But if you're trying to, the parent is not really going to want to hear you for who you really are, and you also can't really be seen for who you really are. And if by chance you somehow force this in their face, they're not going to have a good reaction to that, right? Oh no, you're upsetting the apple cart. You're upsetting the image that they have, and this is all about image for the narcissist. The image they have about the kind of person they are and the way that they can parent. And so if you pierce that image, they're going to have a strong negative reaction. Maybe even to the point of withholding love or doing something drastic in terms of turning off their feelings because you messed with mommy's feelings. And as a child of a narcissist, you learn that you're not allowed to do that. You learn that in verbal and nonverbal messages and cues. So therefore, the child is not able to really be real. They can't really be authentic because they know that that's not accepted by the parent. So the child learns to have this false self, which is really something based on shame and hiding, because that's what the child's learning is, I guess I'm not accepted for who I am. There must be something wrong with me, even though, of course, there's really not. But in the child's mind, there must be something wrong with me. So they begin to feel like there's something evil or horrible within them that they're not even clear about what that is, and they live their life in shame. The child begins to realize that how they look, how things appear, is more important than what's going on. versus anything to do with what was really occurring, what was really happening. This could be with my own feelings, other people's feelings, but also in situations. Everything was about being phony and putting on airs and making things appear a certain way, especially in relationships with other people, because it really didn't matter that you were real or authentic. And for most children, you don't even know how to be real or authentic because you're so out of touch with your feelings because you can't be yourself with your own mother. And sometimes that can lead to OCD-ish type of symptoms because children who grow up like that are so concerned with how things look that you have maybe rituals or patterns of doing things or a certain little box that everything has to fit into in terms of how you approach life, which is basically a form of OCD because you are not accepted in essence for who you are. Which then leads this child to not trust their feelings at all as they grow up or not even know their feelings. And this can be so harmful because not only do you not know yourself and you're not in touch with that, but then as you get older and you try to have a relationship, let's say a dating, romantic type of relationship, you don't really know how to share anything authentic because you haven't learned how to do that. You haven't had the practice, which normally starts in our childhood, usually with our parent, with our mother or father, but in this case I'm focusing on the mother for this video. And because you haven't been able to practice with your mother, you don't know how to do that with a significant other, with a boyfriend or girlfriend when you get older. So it's all complicated and creates havoc as you're learning this as an adult because in essence you have to reparent yourself. This also on some level makes a child question their own idea of reality and what's really going on because you don't have a way of bouncing ideas off of somebody that you trust, of processing things, of getting objective feedback from somebody. So as years go on and you're used to this kind of training, you don't know what's real anymore perhaps. And that's why people who are struggling with this issue oftentimes need to seek therapy as a way to be in a safe setting with a licensed professional to look back on their life and gain a deeper understanding of what really happened. The child begins to feel used on some level, more like they're a thing or an accessory because they know on some level they're not really being valued for who they are because they can't show who they really are, rather than the real connection. So at Christmas time, for example, I'd get tons of gifts. Everything was bigger than life. Everything was a huge production. So that's just one possible symptom of feeling used or feeling like an accessory. These type of things may have very different meaning for a child who's raised like this versus children who are raised with an authentic connection with the parent. So then because of this, a child may have a lot of self-criticism or self-judgments or self-hatred because in essence they think there's something wrong with me. I'm not being accepted for who I am, so therefore there must be something wrong with me. Think if you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you don't know how to work this through. You just assume it's you. The child always assumes it's them when of course it's not. So you feel judged and criticized, and then therefore that's what you start doing to yourself. You're just repeating in a way what's familiar, what's role modeled for you, and therefore the way you're feeling judged and criticized, you start to do that with yourself and sometimes with other people as well. That's how the cycle continues. So a child may grow up always being negative about situations, which is really a comment about how they feel about themselves. The judgments they're making on others is related to the judgments they're making about themselves. This so stunts a child's emotional development and but it so thwarts the child's development because they're so there for their parents and having to focus on the parent's needs and pleasing the parent because that's what the parent wants, a narcissistic parent. So their own developmental stages are getting ignored or minimized, and this is how kids grow up to be people pleasers or codependent, or so focused on other people's needs that they're always putting themselves at the bottom of the totem pole, which of course is not healthy and it causes low self-esteem and a lack of confidence and so on. So then the child grows up with usually this huge emotional void that they just can't fill up. They just can't figure out why they seem to have difficulty connecting with others. But that's because they haven't learned to trust. They haven't learned how to communicate authentically, perhaps. They haven't worked through the fact that they think they're there for other people's needs because that's what they learned from their mother, but they have to learn how to be there for themselves, how to caretake oneself. And this all stems from the fact that they were not provided an environment where it was safe to emotionally develop into one's own self, to find oneself. There is a process to finding oneself. That's just not some term that was thrown around in the 1960s. It meant something. You have to find yourself, which means you have to understand what your feelings are and who you are as a person, your essence. If you don't have that foundation, then you're going to struggle in life in many, many ways, not only with others, but with your own relationship with yourself. So these are just a few of the things I'm thinking of in terms of what it's like to be raised by a narcissistic mother. So if you're an adult and you're seeing this and you're understanding it, delve more deeply into it. If you've not been able to process this yet with a therapist, maybe it's time to go into therapy for a while and understand your childhood more deeply. With education, with understanding comes power and wisdom, and that's how we can grow and heal through this. And if you're a parent perhaps doing this currently to one of your children, you need to address this within yourself as to the fact that being a narcissist comes from a very lonely, empty place. That's the essence of being a narcissist.